Hello and welcome to where we are here at the World Bank FT IMF Pavilion, right in the heart of the Blue Zone in COP Central. And I have with me, I'm Emiliya Mychasuk, the FT Climate Editor. Welcome to you all. With me, I'm overwhelmed by having him here, Lord Browne, who has such vast experience in climate politics and climate change and trying to find solutions and make investments. So, Lord Browne, welcome. Thank you for being here. So, you are a COP veteran. How many of these have you been at?
Well, I've probably been to about 25% of them.
25%, all right.
Roughly, I would say.
Okay, all right. So that's a handful. And this one is the most oil and gas, would you say? This is the most oil and gas presence?
I think the mere fact that it's in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, is it's heavily represented
influenced
by. Well, I think it's represented by oil and gas. Actually, I think the overwhelming number of people are not from oil and gas, or they might have been in oil and gas like me, and they are no longer in oil and gas. So I think that's it's quite a big set of people. I'm told there's over 100,000 people here. That's
We're trying to dig down into those numbers. So I think that's 100,000 registered, my sources tell me. But there's quite a lot, maybe 20,000 support staff and so on. But still, as you say,
it's a lot of people.
A lot of
Compared
people.
with when all this started, you know, if you got to 10,000, you're really doing well. And that probably included all the support staff also.
Right, yes, you're right. Although we have here ExxonMobil Chief Executive himself for the first time. So we have quite a few first-timers.
Yes,
and the broader range, it seems to me, of corporates represented. So how do you think the mood compares then?
Well, I think the mood is quite positive, and there have been some very important achievements which go beyond just something which exists at COP. They will exist beyond, and I think I pick these things. First, Altera, which is the climate financing initiative. $30 billion, 25 and 5. And that'll probably multiply up with more debt and more equity. It has to be matched by the private sector, so this is a public-private marriage. It'll probably multiply up to north of 200 billion. So that's a pretty good start. So I thought that was a very good thing to have achieved, and it's a real achievement that will beget, I predict, more of the same from other people.
So the 25 and 5, the 5 was for the Global South, for those who aren't across it. And do you think you're with General Atlantic investing in climate-related projects? Do you think General Atlantic will take part in
I
that?
very much hope so.
Okay.
Because we are very strong in the Global South. We've been there a lot. We have some successful investments there, but we're also strong in the rest of the world as well. So I think that is a very important thing for us. So I think that's been an important achievement. I think we'll see an achievement of some sort on carbon credits, a really important other source of funding for the Global South, as well as temporary abatement for Scope 3 emissions for very hard to abate sectors. So I like those two. And the third I think I like, from my point of view, is the agreement on methane, purely on methane, which is so important. I've always wondered why we can't get rid of all fugitive methane, you know, because it's so much easier to do.
Isn't the answer that some of the biggest fugitive methane emitting countries are not really on board? China, India, Kazakhstan,
they're coming on
Russia.
Board. They're coming on board now. Not, of course, that they can be forced. No one can force them, but that they can see what's going on, and now we can detect methane emissions. I confess I have an investment in a company that does just that and predicts where those emissions will go. And so it's important for countries to see what's going on and for other people to see what's going on in those countries and for them to respond. One of the big things about methane, as a sidebar, is if you don't respond quickly, of course, pretty soon you've got a lot of methane going to the atmosphere, and it's 84 times more powerful than CO2.
As
so you
you
need
say,
to get on and do it quickly.
It's the easiest thing to do, but even in developed nations like America, it's the small operators that are problems. So,
but now I think there's enough edge to this that we might see a change. So I think that's so I picked those three
Okay,
things.
well, I
and
won't-
I picked
I won't be
yeah.
too sceptical on the methane, although
No.
but, you and I think, saw each other in Glasgow 2 years ago, where the methane
Yeah.
charter cut by 30% by 2030. 30 by 30 by 30, and we're still yet to get there.
Well,
but
I started this in 1997, tightening up everything, and it worked.
Okay.
It actually worked.
So back then in Glasgow, I think you had 4 billion in the General Atlantic Fund, and I think last time I spoke to you, you hadn't spent that much of it, but I gather now that you've found a few things.
Yeah, we've invested half of it,
Yeah.
along with the commitments we have to make to a follow-on investment, and we're very happy with that. We've done quite a few things on wind, distributed solar, supply chain optimization, software, ESG tracking, waste management, and vertical farms. So these are very important things that they're not just one-off investments, they are platforms that can be invested in to grow, and we're in the business of growth equity, so we should be growing these things.
Well, that's a real spread. I'm interested in your view on ESG tracking, because we had a big read ourselves today in the Financial Times about BlackRock and how things have changed in terms of its messaging as an asset manager. And one of the quotes was that in 5 years' time, ESG will be discredited as a term. And those, the implication being those three things will become atomized, the E, the S, and the G, and that asset managers really aren't in a position to dictate.
So let me back up. First of all, Beyond Net Zero is not an ESG fund, it's a climate fund, and ESG for us is do no harm, and
Right.
so we check that. I think our investment with EcoVadis, as a French company that does ESG ratings in a very standardized way for all members of the supply chain. So if you're Nike and you're buying things from hundreds and hundreds of people, you get us to give you an assessment, private assessment, of how your supply chain is working. So this is not about virtue signaling. This is actually about whether you get the job and whether you actually stay with the job and you stay in the supply chain. Our clients are some of the biggest companies in the world that continue to do this. And their emphasis is different. Sometimes it's climate, sometimes it's social responsibility, sometimes it's slave labor. Can you make sure that's not happening? So it depends on what it is they want to demonstrate and where the issue really lies. That, I think, is very good. I've never been a great, I even wrote a book about this many years ago, saying that the biggest problem with ESG, which was CSR at the time,
yes, corporate
is
social
it's
responsibility.
detached from the line, and it is not owned by line managers, the sales people, the production people, the manufacturing people. And if it gets detached, and there are a lot of people talking about ESG, then it's not really ESG anymore.
Right.
And I think folding it back into what you do day to day, of course you would do that. You might not call it ESG, it's just very good management.
Right. That's a good point. I've heard it said from sustainability officers that once their role moves into the finance seat, the chief financial officer is responsible for all things sustainable, that'll be progress. Another thing I wanted to pick you up on was carbon credits. You mentioned an interest there. You have just come from a roundtable, you were telling me earlier. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
well, the roundtable is primarily about Altera and the Global Finance Centre that's going to be introduced here in the Emirates, which will be effectively a think tank about how it is we can further develop finance for climate. So Altera, I think, universally is applauded by everybody. We obviously want to see it go into the hands of many people, which is we expect. And the idea that we can't sit still, there's plenty more to do, is important. One part of that, which wasn't discussed at the roundtable, will be discussed in a roundtable shortly, is about carbon credits. Carbon credits, most of which are developed in the global south, provided that they are standardized in their value, monitored in their effectiveness, and made into effectively a security, then I think they really are valid, and they are actually a source of secondary financing for the Global South, a very important part of that financing. I regard that as the highest activity there, and something that we need to push to develop. I've been to meetings today, and I'm sure I'll be at more meetings, which give me comfort that people are now beginning to join up the different people who look at standards, whether they look at definitions, whether they look at SBT, science-based targets, which we use in Beyond Net Zero, whether it is on the supply side or the demand side, they all now appear to be linking together, which is very important indeed, because it was, of course, an alphabet soup of regulation, well, quasi-regulation. And I think we'll see the government, the official sector, now come in to make that tougher and tougher. And I think if you get that toughness, then I think it's worth doing. If, on the other hand, it's something which is here today, gone tomorrow, which we saw recently with some of the red credits, then obviously confidence disappears and the market seizes up, which is what's happened. So we've got to start again. Yeah.
I did an interview this morning with a man that was Sequest, they're called, raising money for cook stoves in Africa using carbon credits, and he said the market is frozen, essentially, and the value of the credits have fallen.
Well, they are,
markedly.
and there are plenty of credits probably around which actually have no value at all. So we need to sort all that out, but it requires effort. No.
So I've two more very quick questions. One is, as a sort of veteran of geopolitics and markets, and COP, do you see that the Middle East situation is affecting COP at all?
I don't think it's affecting COP significantly. Obviously, you have to be living in a hole not to be affected by what you see around you and the shifting sands of support, whether that's for Ukraine or whether it's for Palestine or Israel, or particularly Gaza. So everybody has that in the back of their minds and sometimes in the front of their minds. It affects everything and does, of course, affect the stability of business.
And do you think the holy grail for some people in climate change, which is a phase out of fossil fuels with a timeline, will be called for at this?
Well, I think in one way or another, probably yes. We need to remember that we will get what we wish for if we're not careful, and we need to make sure we have built enough energy quickly, and that's why I like tripling renewables, which is one of the things here. Yeah. But I think we need more than that. We've got to replace these calories that are generated from coal, oil and gas as quickly as possible. And, where possible, with both industrial processes and the production of oil and gas, to capture and sequester carbon. That's not something that can be done universally. It can be done in certain places where there are good reservoirs, where there's a very concentrated stream of carbon dioxide. But, there's a lot of people working on all sorts of different solutions for that, which are great, because we may have to dig into the atmosphere and take out some of the carbon dioxide that's already there.
That's going to take time, so we have to
get a
timeline.
Move quickly.
Right? Yeah. Are you feeling optimistic overall? You're a born optimist,
I'm a born optimist. You have to be an optimist in business, and I am a born optimist. But I'm more optimistic after day. I've been here 6 days, 5 days, excuse me. I've got one more day to go. 5 days. I'm much more optimistic after 5 days here than I was when I was in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Okay, that's a good note on which to end. Thank you very much, Lord Browne. Thank you to our audience for joining us.